This is The Guardian.
Hello and welcome to The Guardian Football Weekly. Very lucky that someone turned the lights back on in Spain for that one. Barca 3, Inter 3 and some quite brilliant goals. Thuram's back-heeled half volley. Dumfries' acrobatic volley. Lamine Yamal, what a performance. Rafinha getting back on long throws at Elland Road. Barca had the ball, they had the star in Yamal, but they also had the high line tempting Inter all the time. And Inter were a Mkhitaryan toe away from taking a lead at San Siro. Also today, Sid will tell us if Bilbao will beat Man United in the Europa League and can Spurs see off Bodo. There's a Premier League preview as the races for 5th and 8th hot up. There's more ludicrous non-league drama, some lovely emails, your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, welcome.
Hi, Max.
Hello, Lars Sivertsen.
Hello, Max.
From the Racing Post, Mark Langdon is here.
Hi, Max.
And I presume from a hotel in Barcelona, Sid Lowe for part one and part one only. Hello, Sid.
Morning, Max.
Let's start then with that ludicrous Champions League semi-final first leg, Barca 3, Inter 3. Sid, you were there. How was it for you? Oh, well, actually, I know how was it for you. I know your laptop broke. Let's leave that to one side. How did you find the game?
Did I find the game? I don't know. It was... It was wild. It was brilliant, wasn't it? It was a lot of fun. It was there was a little moment in the... Do you know what? I now actually can't remember if it's the first half or the second. I think it's just early in the second half, which kind of summed it up quite nicely. Within a minute, you had Lamine Yamal doing this incredible pirouette past two players. And the next thing you know, Barcelona are having to... I can't remember if that's the one where Szczesny comes flying out or Ronaldo Araujo makes a challenge. So you've got this sort of constant Barcelona attack, but then the threat that's there hanging over them all the time. Really fun. And the first half performance from Lamine Yamal, it was one of those, that you're sitting there with, obviously with colleagues who also work in the game, kind of elbowing each other going, what's going on? Just phenomenal. It made me think last night when we keep talking about Lamine Yamal as one day he's going to be the best player in the world. And you think, is one day already here?
Yeah, I mean, actually, Rich says, should we ban 17-year-olds from playing to give those who are 20 a chance? We can talk about Yamal, Barry. He was just sensational. I mean, the goal was amazing, but there was that one where he sort of sent DiMarco into the Mediterranean. And then I think Sommer tipped it onto the bar. It was an unbelievable performance.
I mean, Federico DiMarco is a really good football player, and Yamal at times made him look like an absolute chump. Inter were putting 2-3 players on him at times, often to little effect, and he's doing things just a human being has no business doing, really, let alone a 17-year-old boy. It's quite astonishing how good he is. I was thinking to myself, just to level the playing field a bit, you need to send him to Man City, give him to Pep. He'll turn him into a left back. You're only allowed pass backwards and sideways. And, just give him to Pep for a year to drill all the fun out of him. And that'll just make football less enjoyable, but fairer for everyone else. He's quite astonishing. I spoke yesterday about his pre-match press conference, where you'd wonder, is it even wise to put a kid that young up for interview when he's going to get interrogated about these, I suppose, a little bit cocky Instagram posts he made. He handled that, took all that in his stride. He just seems incredibly mature, and there's very little he can't do. He's brilliant with both feet. He can pick out a pass. His shooting is amazing. That goal, he just seems to sort of caress the ball, but it thumps off the upright with such force. And you look at replays, there's very little backlift. It's almost like he's passed it in, but it's an incredibly hard curl shot. And I love watching him. And the worry is, they say, you get 600 games out of a player. He's already up to 100. That's a sixth of his games gone already. He's not even old enough to drink.
Yeah, it's 122 if you include Spain and Barca B. Is there any chat, Sid, in Spain about protecting Yamal?
Oh, of course there is. And there is for the basic reason that he is 17. There is also because there's a bit of backstory to this, which of course is that Pedri at the European Championships that were played all around Europe that year played you know, off the top of my head, I can't remember the numbers. I think it was 70 games that season across Spain and the national team. He got injured. I remember Luis Enrique, who was the Spain coach at the time, saying, have you ever seen an 18-year-old do what he's just done in this tournament? And then he got injured, and he's not really come back to being consistently brilliant until this year. And this year, Pedri is playing phenomenal football as well. And so there's that. There's also the fear about what happened with Ansu Fati, who's had a couple of big injuries. And genuinely, when Ansu Fati burst onto the scene and broke lots of records in terms of playing games very young and scoring goals very young and so on, I think we all thought that he was incredibly special as well. And now he looks like he may not have a football career, or may not have not a top level career. So yeah, there's lots of questions about that. I actually think, in a funny sort of way, those questions have eased off a little bit, because we've seen a season in which he hasn't had too many injuries. He hasn't had to sit out too often. And so there's this kind of sense of people just enjoying him instead.
There were so many brilliant goals in this game, Lars. The Rafinha one was the one that made me just make a noise, just sort of laugh because of how hard he kicked it. But Bill says, is this the best collection of quality goals in a match? 5 out of 6 have been worldies. Worldies might be a stretch, but they were all so good.
Yeah, they were remarkable. I know we've kind of already spent most of the pod talking about him so far, but I do think it's the Lamine Yamal one, which is completely just mind-blowing to me, just because Inter are not in a bad situation there in terms of the defenders being where they're supposed to be and the structure of the team. Like, so many goals in football are scored because the team is out of balance for some reason, because they're on their way back from an attack or someone's been tricked out of their structure. Inter are pretty well structured, but the defenders are mostly where they should be, and just running through them as if it was some sort of maze or some sort of, like, it's like when the dogs do the agility thing at Crufts, you know, or whatever, when they weave through the things. Like, there shouldn't be space enough to do any of the things that Lamine Yamal does there. I think that's the one that for me is completely like, because that shouldn't be a goal. If you freeze the frame where that run starts, it's like there is no way you can get through these guys, especially against what is a pretty defensively savvy team like Inter. So that is the one for me that I don't. What is happening here? Like Sid was saying earlier, incredible things.
Will says, do you think the Inter squad heard what Nicky said on Wednesday's pod? Mark, Nicky didn't give Inter a hope, thought they might get thumped. They're 2 up after 20 minutes. You know, that tiny offside for Mkhitaryan would have given them a 4-3 lead. But it's funny, isn't it, in a game where one team just has so much of the ball, you sort of feel like Inter got away with it. Yet this was always going to be the way Inter would play this game.
Yeah, and Max, you might need to sort of retire our Croatia getting tired, and sort of just, it could be our Inter getting tired, because all the talk in Italy pre-game was that this old team was kind of, it was out of legs, and after such a disastrous time. On the way into the office this morning, I had to remind myself that Barcelona didn't actually win the game, because I was so excited with how they played, and it left such a pleasant feeling. And Inter have done remarkably well to come out of that game with a draw, or a point, as Jan Sommer referred to it. He'd sort of forgotten it was a knockout game rather than... I know the league phase went on for quite a while, so it's easy to get into that kind of mode, but he referred to it as a point. But, Thuram's goal that we haven't spoken about yet, I think ordinarily would have been the lead, because it's we talk about remarkable quite often with this game, but it's a brilliant finish from him, back heel flick inside 30 seconds. Dumfries, who was fantastic throughout the game and did probably as good a job as you can do on Rafinha, I think, defensively. He wasn't kind of as influential sort of in normal play. He scored a brilliant goal and was also involved in another one, but I don't think that was Dumfries' his fault. Then scores a brilliant second as well. And I felt in the second half, actually, Inter had some joy on the counter-attack, and it's a unique team to play against Barcelona, because as you're running forward, they seem to be running forward just towards the ball, whereas 99% of other teams retreat in that position. And they worked it out a bit more, I think, actually, in the second half. And towards the end, they were looking like they were beginning to kind of penetrate that crazy offside sort of line that Hansi Flick plays. And It's a brilliant result for them because they came into the game with no confidence and no real form.
Yeah, I was just thinking about this, and time to get out the very small violins and play a lament for the match reporter. But the reason I'm going to pick it out is because I think actually it speaks a lot to what Mark was talking about there. From a match report point of view, and in terms of judging this game, this was a really, really difficult game. And it was a difficult game to top the match report with, because at the end of it, you're thinking, so kind of, apart from Lamine Yamal, what's the story here? Who's won this? Who's coming out of this sort of with the right mindset, feeling like they've got an advantage? So post-game, I don't know if you saw this, but Lamine Yamal was given a shirt for his 100th appearance for Barcelona. And you could see he was annoyed and he didn't really want to do it. And he was upset at the end of the game. And Barcelona were frustrated at the end of the game. And yet they'd scored 3 goals and they'd had this performance. And they played in a way that you would think, okay, this is great. At the same time, you've got Inter, who've got 3 goals away from home and not won. And you would expect them to have some degree of frustration. But Inzaghi was talking about it as a really great performance. I suppose the context, of course, is that they'd lost 3 in a row. And, 2 of the 3 trophies for their treble had already slipped away from them. And this one's there. And so at the end of it, it was one of those games where you think, so kind of, to use the obvious phrase, who's happier? Who's come out of this thinking, okay, this is the result for me? And the answer was neither of them. Very briefly on the Barcelona thing, by the way, and all the kind of the high line and the risk that take. They've been doing it all season. They do it really, really well. I mean, I know that Mkhitaryan one was so fine. But it's also about how well they time it, how well they judge it, because this happens repeatedly. The thing that Barcelona were annoyed about, and Hansi Flick talked about this post-game, was how they defended, but in particular how they defended set plays, rather than how they defended with that high line. So the discussion point wasn't about the weakness of the space you leave behind you. It was about the weakness in the air from set plays. And of course, 2 of the 3 goals come from that.
Yeah, it's worth drilling into that a little bit. I think just because they were 2 goals up, it probably doesn't feel that way for Inter. But I think overwhelmingly the story is that this is a huge performance from Inter in the circumstances. Because we mentioned that they've lost a few of the recent games, but I think it's worth drilling into what those losses have actually been. Because last weekend, they had a last-minute defeat to Bologna, which put Napoli right back into the title race. Then midweek, they get thumped by AC Milan in the derby in the semi-final of the Cup. AC Milan, who have been really bad all season. So, and then this weekend, they lose to Roma, which it almost hands the Scudetto to Napoli. Like, it's out of their hands now. So it's just a soul-crushing 2 weeks for them, really, where it feels like the whole season has gone up in flames. And then you have to go to Barcelona, who have been, one of the best attacking teams in the world this season. So with that context being what you're coming in with, for them to be 2-0 up early in the game is just bonkers. Like, it's absolutely wild and out there. And I guess, with those 2 goals and the disallowed goal, you feel a little bit disappointed. But I think overwhelmingly getting out of there with a score draw is a huge result for Inter that I don't think anyone at all ever, maybe outside the Inter dressing room and probably even inside the Inter dressing room, saw coming.
Baz, that Mkhitaryan offside, Sani Rudravajula messaged, how do we feel about this, and put the still image, when it looks like sort of Stargate, because there's that sort of force field with just the tiny toe sticking out. And I know it's offside, but I don't want that given. Like, he's so level. I know he isn't. I don't know if I'm just yelling at clouds. Well, I'm yelling at you.
I think you are, yes.
But, do you know what I mean? Like, it is an Arsene Wenger torso. He'd be fine. That's what I was looking at.
It's very unlucky. He actually said himself after the game, he more or less blamed himself for being too enthusiastic and straying offside. I think he's been a bit hard on himself. But that's football, he said, and that is football.
Or is it? That's the point, isn't it?
I don't know. You're either offside or you're not. There's no grey area. Maybe there needs to be a grey area, or not a grey area, but daylight or the torso. I don't know, but either way, there will be occasions when people are incredibly unlucky, whether it's a toenail or a half a torso or an inch of non-daylight, whatever, So it's just them's the breaks, I think. If I could ask Sid, Gerard Martinez, left back for Barcelona, he looks kind of a conspicuous weak link. I don't know if I'm being hard on him. I know he's in because Alejandro Balde is injured. And it looks like Koundé might be missing for the next game.
Yeah, that's very big.
Will Barcelona struggle? Will that be a massive blow for Barcelona because of how well drilled and organised their backline is?
Yeah, I mean the Gerard Martin it's interesting actually. On the way out of the Copa del Rey final at the weekend, I was talking to a colleague who said something about Gerard Martin. He said, look, he's so obviously not of the level of all the others that it sort of almost feels both redundant and rude to point it out. Because this is someone doing a job. Because they've got an injury, and this is what you expect from him. And actually, in fairness, he performs steadily, and it's okay. But yes, and also of course it's also about having a fullback in that position with them playing that high line where everything has to be perfect, or the chances of you being exposed are really, really high. And the chances of you being target of them going into that space are really, really high. So the absence of Alejandro Balde on the left is really significant. There's half a hope that he makes it for the second leg. I don't know if that will happen or not. Koundé's absence is huge. He's had a completely brilliant season. And it was interesting, I thought, that the way that Hansi Flick played it yet last night with the changes, that they essentially ended up with 4 centre-backs on the pitch. And I do think that we will see all 3 of Pau Cubarsí, Ronald Araujo, Inigo Martinez start. All 3 of them are centre-backs. I'm not sure which one will be the full-back. The natural thing would be to say, right, we think it will be Ronald Araujo will be the right-back and the other 2 will be the centre-backs. But I don't know, because he tinkered with it a little bit last night and had Inigo Martinez on left. So that's a problem for them, without doubt, yeah.
Mark, a question for you, or for everyone actually. I thought it was quite interesting from California Canaries. As I watched PSG and Barca and asked myself, would we ever have a team in the Premier League with this freedom of expression and individual flair? Is the league conducive to this style? What do you think? Or is that just recency bias that we've just seen Barca and PSG be great, and actually Premier League teams have shown that, Arsenal versus Real Madrid, for example?
I mean, I think Pep Guardiola's become more... I suppose, controlled in the way that City have played. He's kind of, I think, been more fearful of kind of their dominance, and with that he's become, I think, more defensive approach. But I think some of the City teams were brilliant to watch. I disagree that they were boring, sort of at the peak of their powers. Absolutely loved watching Jurgen Klopp's, the team that he built at Anfield with Mane, Salah and Firmino as the front 3. The fullbacks would fly forward pretty much the way that the PSG ones do. So, yeah, I think that I'd be edging towards recency bias, although I am slightly concerned with a lot of the managers now are talking once again about physicality in the Premier League and how you need to have the team of sort of athletes, and they've got to all be kind of runners in sort of a way that was kind of more, I think, in a defensive way rather than kind of how we expect a Doué to be a runner or Ousmane Dembele, for example. But no, I think there's a bit of recency bias there. I mean, there's been some great Premier League teams.
Just wanted to throw a caveat in there, Max, which is just to say that it's interesting that the question frames it in terms of individual freedom. Because Luis Enrique is not an individual freedom manager. He likes the game to be wild. He likes the players to run at people. He likes things to happen, but he's very, very much a systems manager. There's a brilliant. I don't know if it's appeared in England. I don't think it has. It's a brilliant documentary series with Luis Enrique done here in Spain. And at the end, and it's based on him last year, and it's behind the scenes. Luis Enrique comes across as a phenomenal personality as well as a manager. And there's a bit at I think it's the final episode. It should be the final episode in which he's talking about the departure of Kylian Mbappe, and he says next year I'll be able to control all 11 players. So while it is true that they're a very expressive team and a very dynamic team, and lots of players seem to be pouring forward and lots of things seem to be happening, just a slight caveat on the idea that it's individual freedom. I don't think Luis Enrique wants his players to have any freedom.
I kind of throw Hansi Flick into that as well, because you can only play with that crazy high line if the players, I mean, obviously with a very straight and well-organized back line, but also like the players ahead need to be extremely diligent with the pressing and putting the opponent under pressure every time they lose the ball. And with the individual freedom stuff, You remember, Pep Guardiola does give his attackers quite a lot of freedom in the final third. It's just the build-up is extremely regimented, and the positioning outside of that is extremely regimented. But when they do, when it comes to attacking the box, the players have quite a lot of freedom. And I do wonder if Barcelona and PSG look a lot more exciting than this season's Man City, because Lamine Yamal and Kvaratskhelia are quite a lot better than Savinho and Jeremy Doku. I mean, I think that's part of it as well.
Sid, before you go, a couple of questions. One about the Copa del Rey. We talked about it yesterday, but very interested to hear what you think about Real Madrid, whether Ancelotti is losing control or they know he's going and there's sort of a player's rebellion, this whole issue with the referees, just sort of the general behaviour of Real.
Well, you use the word general there. It's such a general question that we could be here all day picking up on different elements of it. I suppose from your point of view, the image is the way that Real Madrid's players reacted at the end. I assume that's kind of the focal point. I think that's conditioned by a whole load of things, and I think one of them is this ongoing, what's the word? I suppose campaign mindset from Real Madrid that everybody's out to get them. They've had this campaign against the referees all year that comes from a club level. You know, I don't want to sort of go back and bang on about this too much, but I think it tells you something about the mindset and therefore the capacity for self-criticism, the capacity for awareness, the capacity for accepting defeat. This is the club that didn't go to the Ballon d'Or gala because their player didn't win it. And I just think that creates or taps into or exaggerates. It's difficult to see exactly where the starting point is and where but it becomes contagious. That kind of anger and that paranoia and that sort of response. And so while I think you can look at it in some cases in individual terms, and frankly, the behaviour of Rudiger has been quite bizarre and really pretty bad for a while, I do think it's a broader thing. One of the things that was really striking about that response at the weekend towards the end. Now, look, I am stupid. Okay, we're not stupid. We know that players get frustrated. We know that there's a huge amount of tension. We know that it's a Copa del Rey final loss to Barcelona. We know all those things make people lash out, make people get angry because they're so invested and there's so much going on. The tension's so high and all this shit. But one of the things that's striking for me about that reaction is there wasn't even a reason for it. There's not just been a goal disallowed. You've not just been robbed. The big headline decisions, if anything, went against Barcelona, not against you. So, you know, that reaction, apart from the fact that you've been beaten, and the way that you've been beaten with a late goal in a game where you thought you might have had it won, and with, you know, Barcelona score late twice, late in extra time, late in normal time, there isn't even a reason. It's not even as if it's the trigger point. What I mean by this is there isn't an obvious trigger point, you know, of a goal disallowed or something. I think there's a possibility of a foul being given that isn't given, but it's a foul kind of, you know, in the middle of the pitch somewhere.
That is it's so interesting, isn't it? Now look, we're going to look ahead to the Europa League in part 2, but obviously I don't know if you know what part 2 is, Sid. So and what happens in part 2. So I'll ask you about Bilbao.
I'm like that film fan that refuses to watch any sequels.
Exactly. So look, Bilbao play Manchester United tonight, Thursday night. They're 4th in La Liga. I mean, surely they're favourites for this competition. I mean, everyone in England is talking about Man United and Spurs, but presumably Bilbao are favourites for this.
Look, I mean, it's difficult for me to answer that properly because I don't know enough about how good or bad Spurs and Man United are.
Pretty bad, see.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean,
incredibly bad.
because of where I'm from, all my mates are Spurs fans, and the WhatsApp group this season has mostly been about them saying how incredibly shit Spurs are and being quite depressed by it all. Some of them are actually going to the Arctic Circle, so that should be fun. Let's go back to that film thing, shall we, by the way? Ernesto Valverde, when he came back to Athletic Club to be manager for the second time, there's this phrase in Spain which is referred to managers and players, you should never go back. And it's the phrase is, sequels were never any good. And this was put to Ernesto Valverde when he came back the second time. He said, well, Godfather Part 2. And and then his second spell at Athletic was really good. Then he comes back for a third spell. And he said, yeah, I quite like the third Godfather as well. They were one of the best teams to watch in Spain last year. They finished 5th. They're in a Champions League place this year. They're incredibly hard to beat, particularly at home against San Mamés. They're very, very dynamic. They were pretty unfortunate they won the Copa del Rey last year, which is their first trophy in 40 years. The final is at their ground. And so, you know, there's this whole sense of a kind of a destiny building towards the final being at their ground, which would be their first ever European success. That obviously brings with it a weight of responsibility, a weight of pressure. Talking to Iñaki Williams is actually going to be an interview on The Guardian today at some point. I'm not sure what time. And he said, look, the way we won the Copa del Rey final last year means that we feel like we've broken that pressure. You You know, that under normal circumstances, we might get to this point of the season. There might be fear in the semi-finals, but we feel we've broken it because we've now won something. That was the first major title for 40 years. They are very, very good. And so in those terms, are they favourites? Yes, they are. But I think I've said this to you before, you know, but don't underestimate, from a Spanish point of view, the sense of mystique and enormity that there is around Liverpool and Manchester United. Whenever a Spanish team, particularly if it's not Madrid or Barcelona, obviously, because those two are huge, whenever a Spanish team plays Manchester United or Liverpool, there is still that thing that, these are proper clubs. You know, these are properly big clubs. And so there's definitely no one taking it for granted. But I think if we look at it coldly and objectively, Athletic have certainly played better this year than United.
Yeah, if there's still mystique there, can I just ask, do they get the Premier League on the television in the Basque Country? Is it not broadcast?
I mean, I should point out at this stage that yes, they do, and they are aware of it, and you know, those who are analysing this are looking at United and saying they're really not very good. But the name carries a huge amount of weight, so no one is assuming that this is easy. I don't actually think he'll play tonight. I'm not sure if Sanset will be available. I don't think so. He is an enormous loss for Athletic. He would normally play kind of behind the forwards, and he's their top scorer in La Liga. He's had a brilliant season until the last couple of months, where there's been questions about his performance level, questions about his fitness, questions about his application. But they're a good side, a very good side.
Cheers, Sid. Go away now.
Thank you. Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Sid Lowe there, on his way to Bilbao, and that'll do for part one. Part two, we'll pick that up with Manchester United. Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. So Sid's sort of done Bilbao, but I wonder, Mark, what chances do you give Manchester United?
It's a really tough one, because I assumed that they would go out to Real Sociedad a couple of rounds ago because they weren't playing well, and Athletic are better than their neighbours, but I still was impressed with the way that United managed to kind of come through that game. And what Sid was saying there about the reputation of United, I do think that counts both ways. I think, you know, there is something about Manchester United who've not played well, I think, for years, really, and yet they still seem to be able to win trophies. So I think if you look at it kind of just logically, Athletic should win comfortably, but football rarely works out like that. And we've seen United actually produce some of their better performances in tough away games. I'm thinking back to Arsenal in the FA Cup at Anfield against Liverpool. They gave Liverpool probably one of the biggest tests they've had this season. So they are a team that's capable of playing that way. And I think when they haven't got the pressure of trying to score goals, that to me seems to be their big issue, is the lack of quality, up front. If they can just defend well without needing to push for goals, then I think that suits them. So Athletic to win, but maybe not as easy as people are suggesting.
I mean, I know we all titter at how bad Manchester United are, and for some of us of a certain age, it will never get old, but they are the only team in Europe that hasn't been beaten this season in European competition, which is quite a remarkable stat, I think.
Yeah, I mean, so if you told them that halfway through extra time in the last round, I'd have been very surprised. I suppose that maybe that's a 90-minute thing anyway. But yeah, you're right. Yes, it's sort of weird feeling. You know, it's only vibes that can carry them through, but maybe the vibes will. Do you think, Lars, that, you know, Bodo will look at Spurs' reputation as trophies and think, actually, this will be fine? I know it's a great story, Bodo being there. You are obviously the Bodo Glimt correspondent. They're missing a lot of players for this first leg, aren't they?
Yeah, so that was the funny one in the second leg of the quarterfinals against Lazio, is that it emerged after the game that there had been like an admin boo-boo internally, and they believed that the cards were wiped. I mean, the cards are wiped after the quarterfinals, but the suspensions you pick up in the second leg are not wiped. So there was actually, the players who have been suspended were apparently not aware that that's what would happen if they got booked. And one of them got booked for dissent, so he's banned for picking up a yellow that was for dissent in that game, which is it's not what you want. It's not what you want. They argued after the game well, from the leadership of the club that was the kind of game where you needed to leave your heart and soul on the pitch anyway, so they didn't want anyone thinking about potential suspensions, which is fair enough. But the outcome is they're missing Patrick Berg, who's their sort of midfield general, and Håkon Evjen, who's a very good sort of slightly more attack-minded midfielder. Them two in particular being out is a significant blow to them. And I think Bodø Glimt might go for it a little bit here, because I think they're smart enough to know that Tottenham's problems are at the back, and I think they're also smart enough to know that for all of Spurs' troubles on Durant, they can attack really well. Like, Spurs have had moments where they've put together some really impressive attacking moves this season. And I mean, I've said this before, but this is completely ludicrous stat that Spurs actually have produced the 6th highest XG number going forward in the league this season. Spurs' XG in attack is higher than Arsenal's at this point in the season, which is ludicrous. It's just they're also one of the worst defensive teams in the league. And I think Bodø Glimt know this. I think they're a very serious club who analyse these things in advance, and I suspect they're going to go out and try to be brave and try to unsettle Tottenham. So I think it could be a very fun game, but it is clear that they are stronger at home than they are on the road, Bodø. So, but I think this could be a fun game.
Mark, time for your twice monthly Spurs lament.
Well, yeah. So, well, I mean, the biggest issue I've got with tonight's game is that I played in a football media match at QPR on Monday, and I've done my hamstring.
Oh no!
Much like Mickey van der Ven. But I'm in row 78 of the South Stand tonight, so I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to get up all of those stairs. It's a big enough struggle when I'm fully fit. Never mind the current way that I am, and I'm already dreading needing to go to the toilet at some stage, because it'll mean I'll have to get back down and then back up again. So
surely you have toilets. They don't just have toilets on the ground floor when they built this stadium.
You have to go. I think you have to go to about row 28, maybe. So it's it's a long way down. As I found to my cost when I've been fully fit. But yeah, in terms of the game, absolutely, huge match for Tottenham. 19 Premier League losses this season, on course for the lowest ever Premier League finish. The manager's clearly going to leave, at the end of the season.
Do you think so? Do you think that's absolutely?
I can't see a way. Even if they win the Europa League and qualifying for the Champions League, having what I've watched from PSG and Barcelona in the last 2 nights, fills me with dread anyway. How many?
But don't you think? Yeah, but you were talking about Daniel Farke yesterday, and does he get a chance? Spurs don't win trophies, right? Like, if he wins the Europa League, surely you go, you sort of earned the right, or you just
no. I mean, first of all, like, the idea of playing Barcelona in the Super Cup just would fill me with dread. Like, let's not go over that. But yeah, in terms of sort of winning a trophy, I actually think that it would be it'd be a one-up, really. I think, for all of those that say that actually, look, trophies are not the most important thing, because everyone has become obsessed with, certainly at Tottenham, with winning a trophy. But there were really good seasons had by Pochettino, and even sort of after him now, like, they don't look quite as bad. But like, Pochettino didn't win a trophy, but the football was great. They were heavily involved in kind of all of the major competitions. And yet, to some people, like, this season could be better just because they win the Europa League. Like, it doesn't feel right to me that happens. I'll be really excited if they do it. All the talk, though, at the moment that's coming out of the club is that if they don't qualify for the Champions League, it's going to be a difficult summer financially, and they owe, I think it's in excess of 200 million on transfers that are still to be paid for. There's not much cash around. The ownership want the club to be sort of sustainable, and kind of all the words that don't excite many football fans. So it's really important in that front that Tottenham can win the Europa League and get into the Champions League. But I'd expect them to beat Bodo Glimt, but I think the final, like, if it was against Athletic in Bilbao, wouldn't fancy them. And having beaten Manchester United 3 times already this season, I mean, nothing spells sort of more Tottenham than to lose the most important of those 4.
Any strong thoughts from you, Lars or Baz?
It's a shame with Ange Postecoglou because, I mean, I think we repeated this ad nauseum, so maybe it's not necessary to put in, but I do like the guy, and I like the way he's trying to play football. I am pro Ange. I am just also pro him being in charge of someone else is the point. Like, whichever club he turns up at next, I will try to make an effort to watch them. And he is very high on the sort of, what should we call that, the expected pints table, like the manager in the Premier League who you'd most likely want to have a pint with. I think he's right at the top. It's just that and also I should add the other thing, no one is arguing that this has been an easy season to be the Tottenham boss just because of all the injuries and all the stuff they've had. But they also have, only the 3 teams that are getting relegated, Leicester, Ipswich and Southampton, have a worse defensive record than Spurs according to the numbers. And that just isn't acceptable. You just can't. And when you're that bad at defending every single week and you're not doing anything to change the approach, it's how long are we going to keep losing in the exact same way? This is pointless, and this is the thing I think makes it just inevitable that you have to make a change, because there's really no sign of any changes being made to improve this sort of stuff. And this is what I think, again, bringing it back to the Norwegians, I actually kind of think Bodø will go out and try to do something here, because I think they know if you sit back and let Spurs get at you, they're actually genuinely good at that. They have really good attacking players who can put together some pretty extraordinary attacking moves, but they're so wobbly at the back. So I think you will see the Norwegians, with 2/3 of their first choice midfield missing, with a tiny budget and all that, I think will go to Tottenham and try to attack. So I think that this could be an absolutely brilliant game. Fingers crossed.
I have a feeling Bodo Glimt are going to do them. I really do.
Do you think that'll be the moment, Baz, when I step off the Ange train?
I might even dust off the old betting account for that one. But I like Ange as well. He seems like a lovely bloke. I'd only have him about mid-table, I think, in my X-Pint Premier League.
Oh, right. Who's top for you?
I think Thomas Frank or Hurtzler, probably.
Okay. Interesting. Hurtzler would have to bring ID.
I was about to say, is he even allowed? Certainly not.
You'd have to get them for him.
Amorim would be up there as well. I'd say he'd be good for a few pints.
Well, especially now. He has some things to get off his chest, I think, after the last few months. I think having a big pint with Amorim right now would be amazing.
Chelsea got a Djurgården in the Conference League. Jim says, dear Max, Barry, etc. While catching up on last week's pod, I heard Jonathan Wilson for the second time repeat the brazen lie that Djurgården means zoo in Swedish. Djur does indeed mean animals, but the Swedish for zoo is Djurpark, or indeed zoo. Djurgården are named for the area of Stockholm in which they were formed, a very nice island of mainly green space, which is so named due to its past as the Royal Hunting Grounds. There is a Djurpark on Djurgården, contained within the open-air museum Skansen. As far as I'm aware, they don't shoot animals anymore, but who knows with royalty, says Jim. Djurgården is also, we've talked about Bodo Glimt, Lars, but as our sort of resident Scandinavian, the Djurgården story is also a good one.
Yeah, it is, but of course that's kind of what the Europa Conference League is for. It is for teams from smaller leagues such as our Scandi brethren in Sweden to be able to have those kind of seasons. And again, I said it when it was West Ham. I'm going to say it again when it's Chelsea. You shouldn't be in this tournament. This should not be a Premier League. I think this brought up in the press conference. Apparently, the sort of squad worth of Chelsea is 44 times bigger than Djurgården's, which is this is ludicrous. We shouldn't have the big rich Premier League clubs in this tournament. Yes, I'm going to keep saying that every year while they're still here. It's going to be tremendous content, but it's
how do you pronounce it? Your Gordons. This is your Gordon.
Well, I'm not Swedish. I'm Norwegian, but Gordon, I think
it's all the same, Lars.
Yeah,
it's not all the same.
Mark.
Yeah, I'll disagree. Respectfully disagree and challenge Lars on the Europa Conference League.
Duel. Here we go.
So no, well, first of all, if you don't have teams from the bigger leagues in it, then I think you're left with a competition that just lacks glamour. So Legia Warsaw's fans that went to Stamford Bridge for the quarterfinal, yes, they went out, but I mean they had an amazing time in that game. And I think it adds sort of kudos to the competition if you've got bigger names. And if you look at the teams that have won it, I think they've been great stories so far. So Roma haven't really had history of European success. West Ham, I know they're in the Premier League, but they're not kind of one of the, not Chelsea. And so, when they won, I've got a lot of West Ham supporting friends and family, and that genuinely, so happy and sort of buzzing to have won that competition. And Olympiacos won it last year.
What about if you've won the Champions League, you're not allowed in, or you've won the UEFA Cup, you're not allowed in?
I mean, I just think that you have to. You have to have the teams from those leagues just to raise awareness and the
let
level.
them in, but they're not allowed to win it.
Well, I mean, Aston Villa were in it last year, didn't win it. Tottenham were in it a couple of years ago, didn't win it. So it's not like the Premier League teams have won it every season. I think Chelsea are a slight anomaly in that they are too big for the competition. But what it's looking like for next season is that it might be a Fulham or a Bournemouth, somebody like that in the competition. I wouldn't ban them from the Conference League.
All right, and we'll start part 3 with the race for 8th place, or whichever place it is, which will get you into the Conference League. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. So Nottingham Forest play Brentford tonight. So obviously absolutely massive for Nottingham Forest. This is their game in hand in the race for the top 5. Philippe was talking about multi-club ownership yesterday. The Forest owner, Evangelos Marinakis, has diluted his control of the club in preparation. Is that like orange squash? He's just like poured some water in. He now owns 1/4 of it. In preparation for Champions League qualification, he owns Olympiacos as well as the Portuguese side Rio Ave. Forest and Olympiacos both on course to qualify for next season's Champions League. Yes, Lars, you look poised to say something.
Just kind of tickled to see how that's actually going to work out. Like, I wonder if when decisions are being made at Forest over summer with transfer window and stuff, if any of the directors goes, sorry, Evangelos, like you've diluted your stake here. You're not calling the shots anymore. We'll see how that conversation goes. I think that'd be very interesting.
Well, the thing is, he's put his interests in Forest in a blind trust, and a blind trust basically just relies on the integrity of the person who's put their interest in the club into the blind trust and the trustee. You can't police communication between them.
Eric says, if Brentford knock off Forest tomorrow, do they have a real shot at Europe based off their remaining schedule? Yeah, this is a win would put them on 49 points, Bournemouth 50, Fulham and Brighton 51. The thrilling race for 8th place, which we think is where the Conference League might end up, does depend on who wins what. Brentford have got Man United, Ipswich, Fulham and Wolves after this. Because that, Lars, Brentford getting into Europe, into the Conference League would be surely you'd be supporting the Bees against your Gordons, amongst others.
No, any team that gets over 100 million a year in television money should not be in the Europa Conference League.
Okay, fair enough. There's
Sorry.
no change. That's fine. No,
there's
okay. Not. Then the race for 5th place, Chelsea at the weekend. Chelsea play Liverpool. What do we think? Will Liverpool have been on the piss, or do you think they'll go and see off Chelsea?
Maybe both. I mean, I find Chelsea really hard to watch, and I know that their fans are saying exactly the same at the moment. They've got a difficult run in Chelsea with Newcastle and Nottingham Forest to play as well. So, like a kind of a less than fully motivated and fully focused Liverpool is one of their easier games, in inverted commas, left really that they've got. So I think it's a massive game for Chelsea, but just struggling to see where the goals and sort of fire and attacking qualities going to come from. So I wouldn't be that surprised at all really if Liverpool got something and maybe even won the game, despite the fact that it's proven that once teams have won the title, their sort of points per game drops off sort of markedly. But I struggle to sort of have any faith in Chelsea's ability to score enough goals to win matches of this calibre.
Villa Fulham in a race for 5th versus race for 8th. The FA Cup final we all wanted on Monday, Crystal Palace versus Nottingham Forest. At Man City play Wolves on Friday. You have to look at a diary to find out who's playing who. Don't you? Erling Haaland back in first team training. West Ham Spurs in the battle for 17th. It's quite Bodo dependent, I imagine, on that. Leicester Southampton, Barry, 2 very relegated sides.
It's a huge game,
isn't it?
Well, it's a big chance for Southampton to get off the 11-point mark, isn't it? And if they can't beat Leicester, they don't deserve to be better than Derby 2007-08 vintage, I would argue.
You're probably right.
I remain convinced that Leicester are far worse than Southampton, despite the points difference between them.
Well on to Chelsea's women. They won their 6th successive WLSL title last night. Lucy Bronze with a late header. Said afterwards they want to go unbeaten, as only ever been achieved 3 times from the WSL, and never, I think, when it's been a 12-team league. They're also on course for a domestic treble. Of course, the Guardian Women's Football Weekly, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're listening to this, we know you're capable of downloading a podcast, so you can listen to that. Birmingham won 2-0 at Blackpool last night in League One. Chris says Birmingham City are now the team to have accumulated the most points in one season in the history of football. Is this ever in any league ever? Worth a passing reference. Aiming for a Nelson by taking it to 111 at the weekend. Jim says if Birmingham reach 111 against Cambridge, sorry Max, will they have to hop on one leg all summer to avoid getting jinxed? I mean, that is some season to get that many points.
Although Max, if Lars is unhappy with kind of wealthy teams sort of playing at a different level to their opponents, then he'd be absolutely furious with Birmingham spending the amount of money that they did in the summer as well, and then competing in League One.
Yeah. I think they probably spent more on Jay Stansfield than the rest of the teams have ever spent in the history of their, certainly than most of the teams have ever spent in the history of their existence. Mike says, just listen to yesterday's pod. So as well as not the top 20, there's a podcast called Beyond the 92. Where does it end? A pod for clubs below the 10th tier called We Don't Need No FA Varsing. A local pod for local teams. Well, Nathan says on that subject, this makes Boreham Wood versus Dorking look tame. AFC Totton played Dorchester in the Southern Premier playoff semi-final yesterday. Dorchester are 2-0 up going into the 90th minute. It then goes 2-1, 90 plus 2, 2-2, 90 plus 7. Totton take the lead, 90 plus 10. Dorchester equalise, 90 plus 15. Extra time is played, and just before the penalty shootout, Totton score a winner to win 4-3. The goal scored by Charlie Austin. So there you go. What a night that was. Well done to Charlie. On the subject of who wrote the murder mystery about someone getting done in with a leg of lamb, Mark says, lamb to the sword. I saw Mark got excited by that. What a way to kill someone. What a way to kill.
I was on the train last night listening. It's so exciting when your name gets called out on the podcast. It's so exciting.
Lamb to the Slaughter was written by Roald Dahl and made into a TV episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents. So were you both right? No, Philippe said Agatha Christie, didn't he? So he's wrong on both counts.
Philippe said Agatha Christie. I said Roald Dahl. I still maintain it was a tale of the unexpected, but I will have to go and check.
Sykes says, similar to the emailer at the end of the episode, I too have had raw meat thrown at me in a theatre. Guardian Football Weekly meat raffle at Earth in Hackney a couple of years ago. A whole chicken would have taken me out if I hadn't ducked. And finally, this is from Shaha, who says, hey pod, Alicia, one of my best friends, I hope I pronounced that correctly, might be Alicia, is getting married next week in Israel to his lovely partner, Cami. They gave me too short notice and I can't make it across the Atlantic. I live in Brooklyn. I'm currently writing from Guatemala. I'm reaching out to you today because the only way I can make up for my absence is to have Barry bless the wedding. Alicia and I first met playing pickup games in Israel, became close playing men's league football together in New York, where during warm-ups, Alicia would try to sell me on some British podcast where a few blokes commentate on who's likeliest to win the Everton Cup. During the pandemic, Alicia moved back to be close to his family in Israel. We regularly talk on the phone to keep in touch. The pod has played a crucial role in maintaining our friendship. In fact, since I started listening to the pod, we don't really talk about football anymore. We just talk about you guys talking football. At times we text each other takes that could maybe be read out on the show. Mutual listening to the show has been a pillar in our friendships and has helped serve as a light distraction in our conversations in recent years from our mutual disdain for the Israeli leadership. I'm also originally from Israel, but have been in the States for more than 20 years. I should also note that I occasionally listen to football podcasts on The Athletic, and when I've tried to share takes from these, Alicia has absolutely barred me from discussing other football podcasts. Yeah, an ultra. I write you all of this to show how crucial a role your banter has played in helping us maintain a sense of closeness while we live oceans apart. Barry is the ultimate hero to salvage my absence from the wedding. I know it would mean a lot, at least to Alicia for Cami and Alicia to be blessed on the pod. And I really hope it's Elisha. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I'm going Alicia. So my apologies if I've got that wrong. But, it would be in keeping with our wedding well wishes if we got the names completely wrong. But Alicia and Cami, Barry, over to you.
Well, I think if Alicia and Cami had wanted Shaha at their wedding, they would have sent out the invitation earlier. So that was my immediate first vibe I got. One of those awful save the day invites, pre-invite, but that didn't happen. So make of that what you will, Shaha. Otherwise, I hope Alicia and Cami have a lovely day in your absence. And I really think, while I appreciate the fact that you love listening to the podcast, I think if we're all you talk about, you perhaps need to develop other interests.
Thank you, Barry. Yes, have a wonderful day. And thanks for getting in touch. And that'll do for today. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Max.
Thanks, Lars.
Thank you, Max.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you.
Football Weekly is produced by Joel Grove. Our executive producer is Phil Maynard.
This is The Guardian.